Garry Cooper, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Just a little bit of a background. You are another incredible person that was introduced to me by the one and only Amanda Lannert. So
And
thank Amanda for that.
yes,
The truth is, like before Amanda introduced us, I've been hearing about you for the last year, for you as a leader and to Rheaply. I mean, lots of news going on with that. So
yes,
thank you again for joining. And if you could first just give us a little bit of a background on you, as well as a little bit of info on Rheaply.
absolutely. So thanks for having me again, Benny. I'm Garry. I'm from Chicago. Been here about 12 years. Came to Chicago in 2008 to start my PhD at Northwestern Neuroscience, where I was studying under a pretty famous guy in Chicago, a guy named Richard Silverman. He was the inventor of Lyrica, which has brought in billions of dollars to the Chicagoland area, but in particular to Northwestern. And I was working with him and the chairman of the physiology department in the medical school at Northwestern to develop a drug to cure or prevent Parkinson's disease. So I worked on that all of my PhD and did a short postdoc. Thereafter, we got the drug patented. That's kind of headed to the clinic. Let's all hold our fingers close and that works out. One of the things I learned though during my scientific research experience at Northwestern is kind of like two colliding realities. The one is that scientific research is super, super important to finding a cure for COVID right now, right? So it's super important. However, it's super underfunded. So every scientist is always looking for more grant dollars, whether it be from federal or from private. So I had this idea of seeing all these idle pieces of equipment and things that we had in refrigerators. Like, why aren't we trying to find ways to drag value out of those to replace the lack of funding? So long story short, Rheaply was born. And what Rheaply does is it helps organizations create an internal marketplace so that if one employee or professor or student has something that they no longer need, they can share, rent, or sell it to someone within their organization or beyond so that they can actually get value for something that they're not using and that their other person gets something for below market. And then where we win as a community is that nothing or less things go to a landfill. So it's this concept of reducing unnecessary costs, but also reducing things that go to waste.
Wow. So are you guys a platform, kind of like an eBay, because you're actually selling the product and you have the buyer and the seller?
Yes, so the way I like to think of us is kind of like an asset management system. So something like an Oracle, an SAP, or IBM sells on top of like an eBay or a marketplace. So we kind of combined asset management or inventory management systems with a marketplace technology into one application so that you can manage your assets. And then when you no longer need them, or you can essentially sell, rent, or donate them.
No, that sounds great. So one of the reasons why I wanted you here is because I wanted you to talk about everything that's going on right now, right? And you and I have talked multiple times since it, and we both have expressed to each other how this has affected us. And one of the things I wanted to say is with you and everybody else that was on that tech panel yesterday, what you guys did was amazing. And I think you saw the support from the community in Chicago because there was what
Absolutely.
125
Yeah,
business
incredible.
leaders.
In the
Yeah,
evening on a Thursday. I mean, incredible.
yeah, unbelievable. So a huge shout out to you guys for doing it. But I want to know from you, man, like what's going through your head? How are you feeling with everything going on? You being the CEO, founder of one of the most talked about tech companies right now.
I think that as a black man, as one of the only two or three black men running a venture-backed startup in Chicago, there have been more eyeballs on me and on the company over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And while that comes with some benefit, it does come with some levels of exhaustion and some levels of just being overwhelmed. So I'm just trying to keep up with my email. I'm trying to keep up with calls because people have interest in trying to support. But they also want to know how they or their companies or their organizations can be better. And so I've just been trying to be helpful wherever I can be. And that's been overwhelming. What's also been exhausting is to say the same things over again, and not because of the repetitive nature of that. I
Tell me
pitch all
about it.
day long. Yeah,
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I pitch all day long. Rheaply, I say the same words all day long about asset management. But it's about the emotion of saying these words and reliving, seeing the stories about George Floyd and all of that over every single time you talk to someone about it. And it just drags you down, at least for me, one energy notch each time I have to talk to a business leader about this is what I think about D&I, and this is what I think about investing, and this is what I think about, you know, whatever the topic might be. So it's not that the content and repeating things is problematic. It's really um, about just the emotion of reliving that scenario.
How has that affected you as a leader, as a CEO of your company?
Uh, so I broke a rule about 2 weeks ago. I've never done this. Teared up on a call, with, so I'm on the Techstars Chicago chapter board, and they had a meeting of these folks a couple weeks ago following the George Floyd situation. And it was just about like, let's just be real. Let's vent as leaders who care about Techstars, and then kind of after we get done with that, let's figure out how Techstars can uniquely help the situation and help our community. And I remember, or not remember, it was the first time ever in my life on a business call that I ever like really was just crying. And I was crying when I was talking, so it was hard to talk, and that was just a whole thing. And then everyone else on the call started crying. But I've taken that and try to take it to our team about it's okay to be vulnerable. So then that week we had an all hands call that was separate from our kind of typical weekly all hands, where I am a Black CEO, I'm leading these folks, and I just wanted to be real about how I was feeling, and that created tears within my team. And that was for sure the first time we as a team have ever been vulnerable or sad or emotional together. So I think net, it's made me feel more confident about being vulnerable about something that means something to me, and not caring about how that looks to someone else.
Wow. I mean, that's powerful. I'm not gonna lie. I was facilitating. We have this listening session at Baker Tilly where our leadership gave all of us an opportunity to express how we feel about
Mm-hmm.
what's been happening, right? But live, and it was some of the partners and myself that were facilitating. And one of the first one that I facilitated, I almost started crying. Like I'd like stop myself because
Mm-hmm.
of how emotional this stuff is. So
Mm-hmm.
um, if it's ever was supposed to happen any time in your career, I think this would be the time to do it. So
Yeah.
what's the advice that you have for, and I'm going to gear this towards not minorities or, women or anything like that, specifically to African American, Black
Mm-hmm.
Americans that want to be entrepreneurs like you right now, that are either in high school or college. Like what's something that you would tell them based on your experience?
Um, that's a great question. I think the thing that comes to my mind most is that throughout their whole life, without knowing every African American, I'm sure they've had to be resilient. I'm sure they've had to stretch. I'm sure they've had to go farther than they thought they could to achieve whatever it was. I think um, do that with entrepreneurship. Do that with starting a company. One of the things that I counsel some of the people who I mentor is I say write things down and work on them all the time, on the train, on the plane. Like when you just have business ideas or have things that are affecting you, like, oh, that would be a cool company. Like write those things down and work on them. And here's the key, do something about it. And I think a lot of times people just don't see African Americans, women or men, who are entrepreneurs, who are startup leaders or startup founders. And so my message has always been, and to your question, is just like write things down and get actionable. Like, what's the next thing I want to learn about this idea to take it forward? Okay, I learned that. What's the next thing? And just start creating a mock business plan. So like, if this were to be a business, like, how could I get it started? That's how I started Rheaply. I had the idea for Rheaply 2 years before we ever launched. And it was just like constant journaling, constant thinking through use cases and problem statements, and then start talking to would-be customers, start talking to would-be investors. And then wherever I can be a resource for anyone who's listening to this, who's an African American thinking about starting a business, I'm happy to connect you to whomever I can.
Awesome. And usually every time I do these interviews, the people that I deal with end up getting like a ton of LinkedIn connections, because usually it's like thousands of people see it on LinkedIn. Is that a good way to reach you?
Absolutely. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. They're going to be a client of ours one day. So I love LinkedIn. So yeah, hit me up on LinkedIn. Absolutely. Or
Awesome.
Twitter. I'm Garry Cooper Jr. on Twitter as well.
Perfect. Hey, man, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to partnering with you in the next couple of months. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.